Good morning. Let's
How are
see.
you? Oh, what a
Good.
different spot.
Yeah. I mean, the house is still the tiny house under the roof.
Mm. But a different corner. What are they doing today? These builders of yours.
Honestly, at this point, I don't know. They're repairing the outside. Hasn't been done for 25 years, so all of the wood is crumbling,
Oh,
and
nice.
they just tend to sandpaper quite early in the morning and try to enter my room
Again, like just
again. Yes.
get up. What time were they here? There, I mean.
I think they're gonna be here in about 5 minutes. They usually come at 8:30.
Oh, okay.
Wait, I have a small issue with the Bluetooth. Just a
Yeah,
second.
no problem.
Gone.
We just test all the things as they come up. Do,
How are you?
do. I'm good. I snoozed for like half an hour. It's so irritating. I don't know how I
Really?
managed to do that.
Half
Yeah.
an hour is a successful snooze. Like half an hour is completely acceptable.
Is it? Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, the Swiss think it's acceptable. That's good. That's all right.
I mean, I'm not sure this Swiss is the perfect example, but some Swiss think is acceptable.
I'd like to be able to just I hear the alarm and I get up. That would be
Mm.
perfect. Because it's never worth
Mm,
it anyway. It's never worth it. Now
never.
I could have used that half hour. I could have gone and gotten nice breakfast or something. Like
Mm-hmm.
something.
So, feeling any specific feeling about snoozing, such as disappointment, shame?
Shame. Yeah, just it's so ineffective. Yeah, a little bit ashamed. We're talking about shame today, aren't we? That's
Mm-hmm. We're
very
talking about
very
shame.
very nice of you pulling us into the topic straight away. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, there is only one thing that snoozing is good for, at least for me, is that it gives me, because I have the snooze that of someone that gave up on snoozing, which is 10 full minutes.
Hmm.
Like I don't even try anymore. And those 10 minutes give me time to review my dreams if I had
Mm.
any good dreams. So you
10
sit there
minutes
and you
is
kind
good.
of
Yeah,
10 minutes is good.
yeah. And
Oh no,
go.
several 10 minutes.
Oh, not
Then
just
up to
okay.
oh no.
Stages like 40 stages of 10 minutes. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Working from home does not help.
Right? How much did that change? Like everything. It's so you're living, I mean, you have a housemate, but yeah. Yo,
Yes.
it's insane. I mean, it's I kind of like it. I kind of like working from home. The coffee is better, the lunch is better. There's
Yes,
no
absolutely.
no more commuting, but other than that,
Living in Amsterdam, the best part, it would probably still be waking up and hearing heavy rain and not having to leave the house at all.
oh yeah, of course. Like completely drenched at work. I remember those.
And biking against the wind with your like
Yeah.
crappy HEMA plastic situation going on.
Bin bag
Mm.
kind of, yeah, yeah. Very sh very
I
shameful.
keep
Very shameful experience. No, but
I don't know. I don't feel it's shameful. If
no.
anything, it's funny. Because Amsterdam is a city that has a little bit of a reputation around of Europe, especially in the Italian part. It's like the city of, I would say, maybe transgression and freedom.
Yeah,
And
sure.
people tend to imagine my life much, much more glamorous than what it actually is. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, Valentina lives in Amsterdam. She must be. So every time that I'm dressed in a particularly odd yet weather appropriate way, I just send videos to my sister.
It's like this is the struggle. This is
This
it.
is what,
Yeah, it's
yes.
not glamorous at all. Do you ever scream at the weather? I do. I used to do that a lot, like when you're cycling and you're barely moving because the wind is just holding you back. And it's raining, but not rain. It's that little like cold autumn rain with a tiny little
Mm-hmm,
drip
mm-hmm.
that just hit you on the top here so that only your forehead completely freezes up and you can barely keep you. You just have to like yeah, no. You know that rain, right?
Born, obviously, of course,
Yeah, it's the
bonding
worst.
through a yeah. No, I don't scream, but I have one sentence that pop in my mind, which is always the same, which is I regret everything.
I regret everything.
That that's like I regret everything, and oddly enough, like I'm sorry, like it's a punishment that I somehow deserved.
Really? See,
No, not
you
really.
can't get away from your Catholicism, even though you're not Catholic. But you can't. No, it's you're culturally Catholic.
No,
You can't help it.
no, I can't. I mean, I'm trying my best, but guilt and shame.
It's stuck.
Funnily enough, I was trying to do some research on guilt and shame,
Oh,
and I did like Spotify research to see if there was
Spotify research.
any podcast episode, and then I clicked on the episode, looked interesting, and again, this is not the first time I ended up in some ultra Christian um, podcast.
Yeah, if you type in guilt or shame research, it's a lot. But it's very interesting. I mean, I didn't do enough. By the way, if you do Spotify research, you also have to listen to iTunes as a control group.
I don't have iTunes as I
It,
don't do any Apple, but
it's a methodology joke. Never mind. It's fine. It, it doesn't matter.
enough to me.
So the engines are starting here slowly, but it's happening. Um,
How long ago did you actually got out of bed?
7 past 8.
That's okay.
Thank you. It's okay. It's all right.
Tiny achievements.
Yes. Yeah. Today it's a shame that we didn't meet like 2 days ago when it was like I imagine both of us like in the fucking hole. Today I feel like okay, we can do this. This is gonna be all right. So
Same. I might even dare to say that I'm in a good mood.
yeah, Jesus Christ. How dare you? How dare you? In a good mood?
Let me,
In
yeah,
this
let
economy?
sorry. Let me just spend 15 minutes on Instagram and then watch the news, and I'll be right back with all of the dread. I promise.
Oh, I thought for a second, like really, yeah. No, yeah. Uh, yes. Do you watch the
No, I'm
news?
kidding.
Do you watch the news?
Um, no, I don't watch the news, but I read the news, which is I just
Sure.
basically screen
It's
out
what
of
I'm.
the like the headers. And then I used to listen to a lot of news podcasts.
Okay.
A lot is like three or four, but it's difficult to find something that is in English that is not from the US or from the UK. I
Yeah.
mean, quite
No, of course.
impossible.
Pretty much.
And my attempts to listen to German political podcast ended because I'm not that much of a masochist yet.
Why? What's it with German news then? What do they do? What do they
No,
do different?
it's mostly like a language thing, because in order to listen to German, I need to focus
Oh, okay.
on what I'm hearing, and English just comes through
Your German isn't
without any
fluent.
filter.
Your German isn't
It is.
fluent.
Um,
Like
no,
audit.
it got rusty.
So
If it's like
you
a
if it's like a sorry, go ahead.
if it's like a kid's book, or if it's like a simple narrative, I can
Mm,
follow. But if it's politics, I need to really focus.
sure, sure. So your first language is Italian, you would say.
Yeah,
Like that's what you
that would be
spoke. What did you speak growing up? Like at home? Italian.
Italian.
Your
Yeah,
parents are
Italian.
Italian are Swiss Italian, Italian Swiss.
Yes, my mother is Italian. My father is Swiss Italian. So I grew up speaking Italian and some dialect from my great grandma, because she was my nanny.
Okay.
So
Oh, yeah. Something's happening. Hello?
I'm
Oh no, it's
here.
fine. It's fine. It just froze for a second. Let's get into it. I'm kind of deflated. I'm deflated and everything is working, and we actually started at 8:30. It's ridiculous. I did not think this would happen. It's very different recording in the morning, It's a very
There
different.
was an option to opt out.
No,
No, I mean,
it is, of course. But it's good that we didn't. Also, this camera business is irritating me because it looks like I'm looking away. So let's do it like, yeah, now I'm staring at you. So I'm very distracted by the technical aspect of these things. It's very different recording in the morning. The energy is very different. Like at night,
mhm.
the day has been had, and all the disappointment of what could have been has built up, and it's like, and now it's like the whole day is still in front. It's like the amount of
Yeah, but
potential.
let's be honest. What are we gonna accomplish today?
No, no, no,
The
no.
bare.
I nothing, but that's has nothing to do with it. The the feeling is different, I suppose. But
Well, I suppose that's good. That's good to know. We can see how today goes. We can leave the heavy things for evenings, and the more, I don't know, uplifting, discursive things for the morning.
who knows? Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I have no idea if this is going to be uplifting.
But I love to get ahead of myself and then, fuck it up.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Does that is maybe that's a good place to start. Like, how do you see that? I mean, you say it jokingly, like I like to get ahead of myself and then fuck it up, but I hear you say that a lot. So
Ooh, in
what's
which
the
context have I said it? Well, I
in
suppose it's
several.
part of interesting. That's the good aspect of having a mirror that actually talks back at you and
Yeah.
pays attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it's that dynamic of getting very excited about things and then being able to see exactly what it takes to achieve them, and then make a plan in your mind for achieving them, and then just giving up at task two, like second step, third step, or jump to the end of the work. It's just I'm not good at following through with whatever project I come up with.
You're not good at it. Why? Where does it stop? Where do
um
you go into the mist? What?
well, I suppose it's an energy issue. So there is a lot of energy at the beginning, and then it dries out immediately, and then I have nothing left to give to that specific project or drawing or whatever that is,
Hmm.
and then it becomes a drag. So I have to force myself to still do it, and then because it becomes a drag, I tend to abandon it, and then it's there nagging at me, like in a drawer or in a folder, and
Yeah.
I know it's there, and I just try to avoid and forget that happened, because then it's like when you don't respond to a text, and then 5 days go by, and like 2 weeks go by, and then there's just no way to come back to it with some dignity.
Well, no, I mean it's hard, yeah, sure.
So
That's shame blocking it. Like you do something, you have a big explosive idea of what the result is going to be. I mean, that's how I experience it. I fantasize a lot.
mhm,
Once this is done, it's gonna be like this. And then it takes work, turns out, as always. Everything that's worth anything takes
mhm,
work. Then it's abandoned. And then the shame of like, oh, it doesn't live up to that initial idea stops me from continuing the work that's necessary to for it to get anywhere. So
mhm.
at the moment,
And
go for it.
go
No, you.
bear to the process of it being less than perfect or less than good. That's
Yeah,
also difficult.
yeah.
Like the trust the process. I don't trust the process. It's like learning how to dance. You either
What do you mean?
don't know how to dance or you want to be amazing. Like going through that stage where you're like an awkward dancer, that's unacceptable to me. Like, no, I'm either good at it or, don't bother.
And how do you feel that that serves you?
Well, poorly, obviously, because
Well, yeah.
I mean, some things you will be quickly good at, but as you mentioned, most of the stuff will require work and effort and try and error.
I think talent is bullshit. I don't think it exists. I think you have interest in something, something that grabs your attention, and therefore you want to figure out how it works. And some people
Did you
are,
find effective? Let's go.
no, did I find?
Did you find effective ways to fight this kind of inertia?
Well, no, not yet. I can't say that it's effective, but I've taken some advice to heart that in like it sounds like it should work. So I was told that, staying on the topic, that shame is the problem in this, right?
Hmm.
Sorry.
That's okay.
In the sense that, as I explained that process, you do something, you fantasize about the end, it doesn't get there, you stop, and then the shame prevents you from going back, prevents me from going back, I should say.
Hmm.
So, two things about that is that one, learn to grieve about your fantasy.
Hmm.
As soon as I catch myself, I try to now um, say that is not going to happen. This podcast thing is not going to go to skyrocket to the most amazing, uh, most listened to podcast in the world within a year. We're not going to
Hi,
host.
listeners.
There's no one. There's not going to be. Well, who knows? In
Hi,
10 years,
family and friends.
hello, people looking like, what the fuck is this? After the apocalypse, people are gonna find this. Look at, I told you, I'm gonna put it on a USB stick and yeet it into the ocean, and then the world's gonna end, and somebody's gonna find it, and they're gonna put it in like, what the fuck is this shit? So, but anyway, point is notice that fantasy, notice that I'm doing that. So let's just put it that way. Let's keep it simple. It's early. I'm fantasizing, notice that, and then say that is probably not going to happen, and then feel sad about that and
Mm.
just be sad about it. And then when the project stops, when the energy ceases, when I'm like, fuck, this is hard, or this is boring, or I don't know what to do, I'm stuck now. Now I have to, read up on how to edit podcasts and listen to 2 hours of video. Oh, I'm bored. I'm going to do something else. Just let it die and do something else. But
Hmm.
don't be ashamed when I think about the project, like, oh shit, I didn't finish it. See, I'm a failure. I never do anything. I let everything die. Because then it allows me to, once I'm interested again, which actually, with like the editing of this podcast, it only took half a day. At the end of the day, when I edited the first one, after like 2 hours, I was bored. And then at the end of the
Mm.
day, after doing something else, I was like, okay, let's give it a go. And instead of then sinking into like, oh, see, I never do anything worthwhile. I lack the follow through, as you say. I was able
Hmm.
to then go, let's go again. And then I finished it. And so to say that's an effective strategy, I don't know, because it's maybe helped once, twice so far. I don't always catch myself doing it, but I now know that that's something I do. I explode into an interest, and then a little while later it dies out, and I'm just,
Hmm.
ooh, a kitten. I'm distracted by something. Ooh, what's that? That's nice. That's lovely. Let's do that.
Hmm.
And so I need to be ready for that, my interest switching back and forth. So yeah.
Listening to what you just said, what I just realized is not only grieving the idea of what this could have been, or at least grieving the fantasy of the outcome, but it's also grieving the somehow grieving the person that you think you should be or that you think you could be.
For
Because
sure.
for me, achievements are very linked with identity.
Yeah.
Who do I think I am? Who do I think I should be? Who do I think I should be by now? And letting go of, for example, it's like, no, I'm not going to be a successful podcaster. Like that's, and then you have to grieve kind of deeper than just a fantasy of a single project.
Hmm. Are you ashamed of who you are?
Um, ooh, I would say no.
You would say.
But I am no, huh. So the first answer that came up was no. Um, but I am ashamed of where I am in life,
Okay. But
but
you
not
just
of
said
who
how
I
those two
am.
things are sort of interconnected, like what you do and your success is connected to the person that you are, but maybe that's not.
Yes, you're right. They are interconnected, but I've been trying to separate them for a while now. Kind of bring the value as a person and the value as a professional member of society, tax-paying grown up. I'm just been trying to separate those two things
Mm,
for a while now. So
mm.
maybe I came
How do
to
you
a
do
place
that?
where they, yeah.
How do you separate?
Um, hmm, I think partially I try to think of people that I mostly admire or that have been very impactful in my life. And I try to see how I would judge them differently if I would take only the job and status in mind. And then that disconnect kind of helps me separate, such as like easy example, like my grandma. She was a farmer that got, like
Mm,
minimum pension. She did middle school and then she was a farmer for her entire life, struggling economically.
mm,
There was not much there, but she has been one of the most positive figures in my life.
mm,
And that did not impact her having being like a positive member of her society, being loved and cared and caring for others. So I'm very aware that the status comes from my father's side, and it's good to have a good balance from my mother's side that was from more humble origins,
mm.
to
You,
see that actually affection and values and good modeling comes from the lesser status actually.
it's funny how you say that lesser status. Like it's implicit that one is higher and the other one is lower,
Hmm.
but you're trying to learn to appreciate the lesser status.
Yeah,
Which
it's
is inherently classist, like internally class.
touche, touche.
I'm trying to be okay with being poor and ineffective in the world, kind of.
It's deep. It's really deep. I did not realize how deep it was within myself
Yeah,
until
but
maybe
these
this year.
these
And the
these
language still is there, as you just noticed and pointed out.
yeah, but these things are
Yeah.
just so ingrained. Like your dad was he cares about status, about money, about well,
Hmm.
how does that work?
Ooh, a lot about my family yesterday and today. He's from um is one of these old and noble families.
Okay.
It's like lower status and noblesse. Um, I think from Longobarд origins. So we have the family tree that goes up to the 13th century. Of course, it's only men, and that came with a lot of status in our small, tiny ass region.
Mm.
There is a picture of my great grandfather going and taking like a aperitivo in the center of the city on a horse. Just
That's
to,
that just the description of that is the most Swiss thing I've ever heard. But okay.
Mhm. Like in the 20s, like fairly dressed. So that part of the family was very, very wealthy, and my and that ended up being with two. I mean, that grandfather had two kids. One was my grandfather, and the other one was his brother. My grandfather became a psychiatrist and a communist, so he kind of had this refusal of status and wealth, and he left all of the family fortune to be handled by his brother that dilapidated the entirety of the thing.
Well, what did he spend it on?
Honestly, I think horse and drugs and horses possibly. I see him only once, and he clearly did put his body through a lot of drugs. It's mostly just cocaine.
Oh,
Um, So that happened, and so the wealth was gone, as
Yeah.
in the classical wealthy family, but the status remained. There was like, the doctor, the director of the facility. My grandma was also from like the upper middle class, trying to achieve, so she was very much about status, and that just ripples down. The intellectuals, um, yeah, I would say like the rich intellectuals of the small region,
Mm.
and they really were. There's not pretense, but um, and I think especially my father had a conflict. I think this conflict originates from him because in his youth, he did things that, long story short, he ended up in juvie. So his
Juvenile
father
prison.
forbade him in juvenile prison. His father forbade him from becoming a doctor himself, and he could become a vet, which is a lesser doctor.
Okay.
So that conflict is there, like this refusing, but at the same time being very much about
Mm.
status.
So
So like
even
this
that, even
inachievable status.
like even that, being a vet, a lesser doctor, unless it's a zombie apocalypse. We talked about that. It's always the vets that
Yes,
survive. It's always the vets.
yes,
But yeah, no, okay. So to what
a
extent?
lesser doctor.
So to what extent was that sort of, transposed onto you growing up with it?
Um,
Like, how important is achievement and status to your
I
father,
think
onto you as the youngest child?
I think has always been very very covert, because it's never been explicit that status and money were something that was required to be achieved,
Hmm.
because there was this, talks about communism and anti-capitalism, and the system, not in a hippie way, but like in a middle class way, the system, um and so there was always this disdain towards money.
Hmm.
This like, oh, I never have money in my pockets, and it took me a while to realize that that was the feeling of someone that felt, it's almost like an exilio, exile,
Oh, exile. Yes,
exile,
like
exile.
somebody who's put on an island away from the
Yeah,
political
and it says
situation.
like,
Sure.
fuck the mainland. We don't like the mainland. This island is fine. We got
Okay.
boats. Um, but then every time that I tried to sail anywhere else but the mainland, I would just get this odd judgment.
I'm lost
It's
in
like,
the
no, no, but the
metaphor.
mainland is the way to go. Yeah,
I'm lost in.
sorry.
So capitalism is the mainland, and your communist family in the Swiss mountains is the exile.
Um, yes, I think it's specifically my father's side of
Your
the of
your
the
father's side. Okay, so he was
my
like,
father.
fuck money, it's bullshit, status, all that
Yes,
stuff, the
yes,
rat race nonsense. But
but
meanwhile, under the undertone was competitive and
yes, competitive with, probably also with his own, with himself, with his own brothers,
yeah.
and then as children, facing our cousins.
What do you mean? So how did
It
that
was
work?
always it was always very important for my father that we would study, that we would go to university, that we would graduate.
Mm.
And part of this was because we were kind of expected to keep up with his cousins, with my cousins. Does it make sense? It's like, oh, my
Yeah.
brother's children are now working in the Swiss banks, and my kids is like a musician, a gardener, a social worker, a software engineer, and a gastronome. So it
Okay.
looks like an interesting family to me, but
But
like
it doesn't fit the picture of.
on a subconscious level, that is not, no.
Mm.
It took me a while to just realize these narratives and make them explicit, because then when you're explicit, it's like, okay, that makes sense.
Mm. And how did that affect you? That was the case growing up. Now that you're
I
now
think
that you're your own sort of.
person. I think the main thing is that, it doesn't really matter what I'm doing. I've already failed.
Doesn't really matter what you're doing, you've already failed. Okay. Why? What? In what way? What does fail?
Failing in this case means probably not make enough money.
Right. We talked about that earlier, like how it's
Yeah.
just attached to that monetary score. Your high score isn't high enough.
Yes. No, my monetary score is not high enough,
But
and
you live in a 300-year-old building in Amsterdam, and
ab-
you eat
like
like
absolutely.
you've cooked dinner for me. Like I can't afford that kind of meat, let alone the wine, like and the whiskey and stuff. Like you do fine. You do really, but it's not good enough. It's not
But
enough.
it's not good enough.
That's
It's
a
not
high
enough
standard.
because yes, yeah, no, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like the standard might be just too high.
Because the cost of living in Amsterdam these days is ridiculous. Let's just put it out there. It's ridiculous. If you want to live there and you want to have a half decent life and you shop at Albert Heijn, like the main shopping place, like you're doing well. You're doing really, really decently. But I hear this from a lot of people. Like it's not, and I'm not distancing myself from that. I know I'm leaning into this because I know this feeling very well. Let's get that straight. I'm not coming at you as the I don't know. I'm asking the questions this morning, but
Yeah, true.
I'm not better than you. Let's call it what it is. I'm not I feel this very much. But um I mean what is enough? What's the measurement? What's the standard?
I think like any irrational feelings, once you grasp it and once it's explicit, you can try to put like a reasonable um either a number or either like yeah, like an achievement.
Sure. So how much would you need to earn to feel okay with yourself?
Good Lord, like it's particularly difficult being a Swiss because whatever number you have in mind now,
Yeah.
I can speak with a friend in Zurich and think, oh sure, like 7,000 Swiss francs a month. That's a possibility. Like that was a possibility all along. Yeah.
Wait, I don't
So
understand. Is it how does the Swiss franc relate to the euro? How is it?
it's about 1.2 now. So that
Okay.
would be like like a
Jesus.
five and a half, 6,000, yeah, six
My
thousand
goodness.
euros amount. Yeah. So you mentioned, what makes you ashamed of is like squandering your privilege.
That's a big one for you, eh? You've mentioned that before.
Yes.
And so your privilege in this case, so that I understand, is that you're not being a whatever professional psychiatrist
In
in Switzerland.
in Switzerland and earning what the rest of the Swiss whatever is doing, which is also faulty narrative
Why aren't you in Switzerland?
because I get bored by Swiss society.
Why?
Um, because of this extreme status conversation as well. It's like, oh, we're better. Oh, we're richer. Oh, we're cleaner. Oh, it's so much prettier. And it's like, fuck you guys, we're tiny.
But you've left for that reason, and now you're in Amsterdam being worried about, because you just mentioned it like it's my privilege that I'm squandering. I should go back, really. Part of your mind thinks you should go back and just do
Hmm.
that. That's so,
Go back and be rich or whatever that looks like. Yes. Um,
that's, that's, that sounds
mhm.
wildly unproductive to have that conundrum in your head. That sounds like it would take up a lot of energy for very little payoff.
Well, welcome to the brains,
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah,
own.
yeah, for sure.
It does, because then it consumes a lot of, and you think, for fuck's sake, like either one or the other, but then enough with the conversation.
Hmm.
But the conversation nevertheless happens, and I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why I cannot just wait for one or the other.
Yeah,
Maybe next
it's
year we will
it's
record in
no,
Zurich.
it's yeah, maybe. It's a good question. It's the same. It's very similar. Um, I'm Dutch, but I've never felt that way because of kind of the same way you describe it. Like everything in the Netherlands,
Hmm.
especially Amsterdam,
Hmm.
is sorted, right?
Hmm.
There's a joke that if your toaster breaks, you call a real man because you can. Like nobody in Amsterdam in the Netherlands knows how to fix it, how knows how to fix anything.
Hmm.
Um, because there's no civil responsibility because there's no necessity for it. Anything breaks, anything goes wrong, you pick up the phone and somebody comes over to apologize and then to fix it. Um, which is very dull. It creates a very dull society, I find. That's one of the main gripes I have with being from there. It's just so obvious that it's kind of the privilege has created a weak society, I suppose. Maybe weak is not the right word, but just like gray
Uh,
now.
mm,
Um,
Comfortable.
yeah, exactly, completely comfortable. Um, I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm
No,
kind
but you
of
said you
no,
kind of.
I don't know. Go for it. I regret recording in the
Um,
morning. The words that I like, there's words, and then there's me, and we're just on a different. We're doing our own thing. So that's why I'm
so
asking
that's
you
so
questions.
that's
Let's keep it
why,
that way.
yes, I can see a
Yeah.
very interesting. Okay, we can also keep it that way because on the other side, I was starting to feel a bit self-conscious that I'm the only one speaking,
No, no, this is
and it's like I
interesting.
should
This
also
is very
ask you
interesting.
questions.
No, but
Okay, let's
don't
just.
worry about it. Don't worry. I mean, if you
Okay.
have a question that you really want to ask, do it. But please don't like. As I think for me, what's becoming clear is that we've made a plan. I've made a plan for this episode. I've written things down. I've not looked at the paper once. Structure is not what we do. Yeah. So
No. Oh, fuck, that was my job.
yes,
But
it
now
is
I'm
your
but now
job. Don't worry. This is
but
very
now I'm
interesting.
too taken in my conflict, in my status conflict.
Your
Mm.
status con. Oh wait, the microphone is messed up. The No, because look, I mean, uh, uh, we're talking about what are we talking about? Words. Shame.
Status,
Shame.
shame, conflict.
So, yes, conflict. You were, what do you mean
Or
conflict?
conflict of it. Oh no, not conflict, like conundrum. Conundrum?
Conundrum?
Conundrum. Of like being in Switzerland, not being in Switzerland, more status, lesser status, more money, less money.
Mm.
It's like I mean, maybe I'm continuing the family tradition of going on exile and then, you know,
Maybe.
missing the mainland. It's like, oh, that was like the foxes with grapes, which you see. I use this, it's like
You mean the sour grapes? Like,
yeah, the
I
sour
can't
grapes.
have it,
Yeah, yeah.
so it sucks.
So it
The
sucks.
fox with
Yeah.
grapes. I'm sure that that's an Italian saying, the way you put it like that. Ah,
Yeah, yeah,
the
it's
volpi,
la
whatever.
volpe l'uva,
La-
come la volpe con l'uva.
Like a
Yes.
wolf with grapes. Yeah, okay. This how we
Hmm.
in English you just say sour grapes. Yeah, and nobody knows it's from that fable, I think, or very few people.
Mm.
Aesop's
Actually,
fables or something. Yeah.
I had this as a response, and that would really piss off guys. Whenever I would see like a that was part of my angry feminist phase.
Of your what
Like a
phase?
guy,
What phase?
angry feminist phase.
Oh,
If there would
phase.
be a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
guy,
Sure.
like a guy kind of complaining about women in general, like as a broad category, it's like, oh, and women this and that, I would only reply, said the fox to the grapes. Like,
Ah,
disse la volpe all'uva.
because
That would piss
he
them off.
couldn't have any, so he got bitter.
Yes. It was rude, but you know,
It
it was a
happens.
phase. It does happen to get bitter. So yeah, so this is also partially the reason why I've moved so much.
Why? Because you. What is the reason? The guys?
Because no, 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 not the
Oh,
guys.
well, I move around.
I had
I have them everywhere.
I had to flee, there's certain parts of, you know, Sofia that I cannot go back to. Um,
It sounds like a bit. Have you ever had a relationship so bad you had to leave the country? But yeah, go on.
I have.
Finland. You don't go to Finland anymore. Like that country's burnt.
I've never been to Finland.
You've never been to Finland.
I've never been. I've been
It's pretty
invited
cool.
over many times. Yeah, I've heard going getting drunk at the Maki,
Wait, did I
like
go
the
to Finland?
little hut.
Yeah, that's like
Or was that Sweden?
no,
If
no,
it was
no.
fun, it was probably Sweden. How Finland? Hi, Finland. No, no, no. I've actually never been. Okay, we're losing the conversation.
Don't.
I
Yeah,
think
I
that
wanted to slide in on that experience you were having about being communist on one hand, but then also just a capitalist at heart, or well,
classist,
maybe a
like a classist, classist, not capitalist.
okay.
No, it's not really capitalism that comes from my family. Is really the smugness that comes from um, wealthy families and families that have been wealthy for a long time, like generations of wealth.
And
That
that's
sense of that sense of comfort. But then it came down without a sense of comfort because it came from a situation of exile that probably actually started with my grandfather, who studied psychiatry because his mother was heavily depressed.
mm,
I don't blame her. They emigrated to Argentina um, in the 19th century,
okay.
and they did very well there. And the
Hmm.
kids, they had four, three daughters. They were sent back in boarding school in Switzerland to domesticate them. And in Argentina, they had a pretty free life. They would ride horses and be like in the pampa with
Mm,
plenty of space and plenty of things to do. They came to Switzerland right before the 20s um, to study, and then First World War started. So all civil travel was blocked for a very long time. She ended up marrying, and she ended up never going back home. So you live as a teenager to go to
oof.
boarding school against your will, and then you're blocked on the other side of the world, and then you eventually start a life.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then you're kind of stuck into this very classical situation of the wealthy husband that also has a lover on the side. This kind of classical wife and then the lover that still
Mm.
lives in an apartment. Anyway, a lot of family stories. There are plenty of stories there. I just love to know about these things. I'm a bit disappointed that now my grandma is too old and too grumpy to tell me things because I'm a
Mm.
woman and she doesn't like women.
Yeah, you said she doesn't like women.
No.
But it also, I mean, it's interesting every time we try and steer back to your how it affected you, you end up talking about your family, not about you.
Mm-hmm. Because I suppose that's the small one. As the small one, I always kind of refer to the old ones, like to the grown-ups, like
Mm,
looking up.
mm,
How this affects me, I think it just creates a lot of conflict and the awareness that what has always been confusing me,
yeah.
for example, and I'm gonna talk about my parents again, is just this um, whoever I'm talking with, I will believe their story. Like I would see their point of view, and their point of view would make complete sense.
Oh yeah.
And then the completely opposite story also makes complete sense, and it's true. And you have two different things that are both equally true, and they're in conflict with each other.
Interesting. The same way it works
And
in
I
your head, really. I mean, both sides are true, and so you can't get rid of either of them.
Yes, exactly.
Wealth is disgusting and unnecessary on one hand, and on the other side, it's highly desirable and a source of shame if you don't have it.
Yes.
Interesting.
And how to integrate these two things, it's where the conflict is for
And
me.
do you feel that that's necessary, integrating two opposite sides?
Mm, yes.
Why?
Yeah, or at least deciding where you stand.
Okay. So either you pick your mom, who do you love more, your mom or your dad, kind of thing, almost, or you get the opposite sides of magnets and keep them
No,
together.
or even you decide it doesn't really matter to you because it's their marriage. and you decide for yourself that you're gonna,
Marriage. I don't understand.
okay, no, there was an example of the mom and dad, like
Sure.
you can either decide not to pick a side, and with wealth and money, exactly, like when is enough. So I'm trying to find some kind of tangible things that I can, um that have a number, for example, or that have like a timeline,
Mm,
and that are reasonable.
mm,
I'm not there yet.
no.
Just saying, I'm not there yet, and I need to do this process without my Swiss friends, weighing in with the reality of their salaries.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a good comparison to be making. If you've left to not be part of that, then it shouldn't be a comparison for you to make.
No,
But
fair.
but you're no, 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 it's not about fair, but it's interesting that you do. It's almost as if the conflict, I mean, that's what it sounds like. Yeah, I'm doing this. I didn't like it, so I left. But then I keep comparing myself to that. It's almost as if the conflict is a way of staying in touch with, okay, maybe not your culture, but with your personal background, with your family background, with sort of the atmosphere of growing up. Because it sounds like you grew up in that conflict where you had these two, a narcissistic father and a sounds like
Mm,
a sweet, caring, empathetic mother who also have very different
thank God.
views of the world, completely opposite. Like it sounds like Cold War, actually, if I'm honest.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of a Cold War
Mm-hmm.
within a family, and you're the youngest, so you're the observer, you're the diplomat. Obviously, the youngest is always the diplomat. Oh yeah, your point of view is great. Your point of view is great. Why don't we remove the missiles from the Cuban border and we just have dinner? Um, but now that you're a grown up, you're kind of looking to keep a baseline of that Cold War tension in your life by comparing your financial status to people in Switzerland, which one is completely, I mean, Switzerland is tiny, right? And so, and everybody, it's very homogenous, and basically everybody is wealthy, except of course for a small minority. It's a very different situation than the rest of the world. So it's almost purpose, like you're comparing yourself to something that's clearly unattainable, right? And why
Mm-hmm.
would you
Yeah.
do that if it's not to feel bad about it? And why would you want to feel bad if it's not to have that's that thing we I sent you yesterday that you were so grateful for because it made you cry about how that video it was talking about what was the title? Why self-pity? Why
Why
self-pity?
self-pity feels so good?
Yeah. And one of the mentions in there that I've heard from other sources as well that's really interesting is that we prefer the what
Mm-hmm.
is familiar to what is good, right? What feels good
Yes.
is not the aim. You want something that feels familiar. So if you feel like you're a piece of shit, you're going to keep going into abusive or toxic or whatever negative relationships because it computes. Yes, this fits.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm used to, and you'll pick that over the partner or the situation that's nice and accepting and loves you properly and has
Mm-hmm.
conversations in a way that isn't like the way you used to have with your parents or whatever the example is. And to the extent that you'll destruct the situation like that simply because it's nice and therefore you shouldn't be there
Yeah.
because you don't have nice interactions with people. I'm not saying you, I'm saying that's what the
No, no,
video.
and yes, yes, yes.
And this
Yes.
this 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 kind of relates to your story. It sounds like I'm poking now and I'm being the psychoanalyst, which is not at all my
No, no, but
my
but
role
it
here,
is
but I just
it
know.
is interesting. I do like it. I mean, I don't, but I do like it.
Yes.
It's too early for this.
Yeah.
Um, no, it is interesting, but I think that's partially the problem of, um, it comes down to coping mechanisms, that they had a good reason to be there once they originated. Like they served you a purpose. And if they are there, means that the situation required them somehow.
Yeah.
Some are better than others. The problem is what happens with leftover coping mechanisms once the threat or once the situation is not there anymore. Then they become an obstacle. So now I'm not in the, the youngest in the midst of this Cold War of status. I'm a grown-up that can choose pretty much really with unprecedented freedom in the human history. What is it that I want to do?
Right. Yeah.
But I'm still blocked with all of this, with all of this pressure that it's like the vine metaphor from yesterday. Like you have a problem and then you develop around the vine, and even when the vine develops around it, and even when you remove the object, the character is shaped around it.
Yeah,
So that
sure.
remains
Yeah.
and serves absolutely no purpose.
I always think about it as a soldier coming back home and then having to be part of society again, even though you've been sort of surviving mortar shells for 5 years. And it's like, how do you stop being that guy? Um,
You don't.
No, well, exactly. You don't.
You don't.
You don't. So then what do you do instead?
I think a lot.
You think a lot. Does that help?
Yeah, I no.
No.
Well, in a way, yes, it does. But like I'm also someone that believes irrationally that if you think about something hard enough and long enough and extensively enough, you will find your way out of it.
Yes, you can find a solution. I have that illusion as well.
Which,
I have that
yes,
illusion as well, where just days go by and you're just like, and
if only.
eventually I have to grab myself and say, dude, just go do something instead. Like
Mhm.
you can't, especially when it comes to shame, because this thing blocks the whole process because I'm trying to think of an example, a recent example of how to put this, because I think it's an interesting process. And as we're talking about it, well, I kind of said it earlier already, but yeah, go for it.
So if I think recently in the past year, but also generally in my life, the times that really come through where I felt a sense of confidence and a sense of somehow kind of uncontaminated personal identity, because of course you have the
What
influences
does
of your
that
of
look
your of your
like?
parents, of your family. Exactly, like
What the fuck is
it
that?
was. um
Uncontaminated personal identity. That sounds like a condition almost. Like, ugh, she suffers
like
from
uncontaminated.
uncontaminated personal identity. Oh my goodness. We must lock her up. Pull her teeth.
Here I am. No, don't pull my, just like good teeth. But speaking about the Dutch being super organized, I even receive emails from my dentist every 6 months saying, "Hello, Mr. Bosia. Has been 6 months since we've seen you. You want to book an appointment?" Like, leave me alone.
How judgmental are Dutch dentists? Like, I can't think of anything, an entity in the world that's more judgmental than a fucking Dutch dentist. Like, they look in your mouth and they're just like, you don't floss, do you? What? No, I don't. I don't. I
Well, my
sometimes
dentist is
sometimes I
Cuban.
eat it. Sometimes I leave the white stuff on the tangerine and then and just have to peel that out with a knife. That's what I call flossing. What do you? Stop judging me. You're in my mouth. How dare you? It's true. Anyway,
Welcome to the experience of being a woman. Stop judging me. You're in my mouth. Never mind. Um, good, good morning, everyone. Hi.
see, this is why we need to record in the evening because I'm not ready for things like that.
It was a low blow, let's
It
be
was,
honest.
yeah. Well, the nice choice of words there. See, that's how much. That's how well I can play into that now. Low blow.
So, uncontaminated. How was it? Uncontaminated.
It's gone, man. It's gone. It was. It had.
No, but I had good insight, and
Oh,
then I
inside.
just
Do it.
had
Let's
to,
do it. Do it.
and then I had to lean into these bullshit jokes. So bad. Um. Oh yes. um, psychedelics.
Okay,
As
cool.
millennial as this sounds, those have been the experiences where, and it makes sense if you read a little about it, that kind of um, the dissolving of the ego,
Sure.
of your daily life ego. Um, and as cliche as that might sound, has been truly eye-opening to the possibility of something else than this very well ingrained internal monologue. So I think, like, for example, um, this is the one that explains it better, and was with ayahuasca. So it's a very strong,
Oh, I see.
it's a ve-
Did
it's
you
like
do
a
that?
very
Did you get
strong
guide?
experience.
Did you get guidance with
Yes,
that? Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yes. Was in Ecuador, I think.
Mm.
I was very lucky to be a guest in a ceremony. I mean, those as the Europeans, we always have the impression that things are done for us. But there is, I don't, okay,
No,
not
no.
going
What do you
into
mean?
the tourism of ayahuasca.
Oh, I
Um,
see. I see. Okay, as the tourism, as yeah, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah. But there is also inside tourism. So these two people, not tourism, but like these two well, shamans from the south of Colombia region. They would travel to Ecuador and Colombia
Yeah,
to do ceremonies, and they would mostly do it for other South American people, but not per se Colombian people, not per se indigenous people. Would be like your average hippie Ecuadorian guys. I was with some Argentinians, with some Colombians as well, which is how they knew
mm,
them. But what I found particularly nice is that the people doing it, they take it very seriously. I mean, it is their job, and they genuinely not. They know what they're doing, in the sense that they have seen a lot of people go through a lot of things, and they are not very. If someone is going to get a panic attack, they've seen it. If someone is going to
sure,
shit their pants, they've seen it. If someone is going to throw up, they've seen it, and they have this very reassuring attitude of like, no one is going to die, we're going to take care of you. If you feel particularly bad, they just surround you, they sing
mm,
with you. Just like, it's like your most
sure.
trustworthy,
They're
um
shamans. That's what they do.
the shamans. Yeah.
They actually have
And they
a
were
purpose in
very,
it. So how did that
yeah.
affect? Because I'm not sure where this story is going. Like
No, no,
you
no.
did
And I'm just
ayahuasca
I'm just gonna,
and your
yeah, that's
ego
like
dissolved.
at 8:30 in the morning. Yes. So the trip itself it was very long, and
Sure,
it's very articulated, very complex and exhausting
as they tend to
and
be.
amazing. But I had this moment where it's like a triangle. So because you feel slightly sick, so I did spend most of my time kind of bent over my knees, kind of
Yeah,
cool down and cause the nausea. And there was this like triangle in front of me of a conversation going on between the different languages that I speak. So there was English, Spanish, Italian, and French, and German, thank goodness, was not there.
no.
And they were all bickering.
It's the last thing you want when you're having a trip is for German to show up. God,
Nein, danke.
yeah.
That,
Where
nein.
you're tripping and your ego is dissolving, and from the corner of your mind you're like, in German we have this word for this. It's very particular. I bet they
It's
do.
actually just a word
Is
to
there a
say that.
German word for having your ego dissolve?
Hmm,
Ego
possibly.
dissolution experience? Nah, whatever. But okay,
Probably something.
that's interesting. So that's a triangle with five languages having a conversation
Well, it's triangle
about
with
what?
like the tip is where the bickering is happening, and then it has no end in the back. It kind of ends into some dark,
Hmm,
comfortable, like a summer night, like a warm,
sure.
nice smelling summer night in nature. Like that's kind of what the back feels like. It makes sense
Yeah,
when you're
yeah,
in
yeah.
DMT.
It does.
And there was all of this bickering, um, and it was like getting escalated, and everyone had a little opinion, and everyone had like all of the character flaws. Um, and then was this like this silly realization of like, oh, but none of these things, like none of these things is me. All of these things is, it's a part of me, and it's also, none of those are my mother tongue. The dark void in the background is my mother tongue.
Hmm.
This kind of removal of it, it did make sense.
No, no,
And of
I'm
course,
not.
if you,
I am laughing because it's such a. I mean, yeah, you hear stories like that
yeah,
a lot.
and my religious friends would say, oh, of course, that's your immortal soul.
Yeah.
Like that for them, that's a no-brainer. The Christians and Catholics is like, that's, that's your soul, that's your immortal soul, what you
Yeah.
felt there.
Oh, yeah.
But as a secular person, you think, okay, but then what was that identity that had no um no spoken language to offer whatsoever,
Mm.
but is nevertheless strong, articulate, willful, and intelligent.
Mm.
And that, I suppose, is what lies behind what is that you've experienced in your life, and it's more the core of your personality, if there is such a thing.
Sure. Well, I mean, language is interesting. That those were the what separated from what felt like your soul or your personality. It's like, because the language, of course, is a series of masks with which you talk to other people. Like, I don't know if this is true, but I was told or read, I'm not sure, yes, that the word person is derived from persona, which is which was first used for the wooden mask that the Greek theater players would wear. Persona, the sound that comes through, it's
Hmm.
amplified by the wood. So, a person and their language is the mask that they put on in order to deal with other people. And the thing that's you, the warm summer feeling behind you, your soul, has no language, because what is it needed for? It's not pretending for anything. No, I
Hmm.
mean, these kind of ego dissolution stories and experiences are very interesting. I always feel, whenever, even with mushrooms, when I do mushrooms, I got stung by a bee once, like right between the fingers here while on mushroom. And I could just look at it like, oh, that's so interesting. The body that I'm borrowing is probably in a lot of pain right now. Like, that looks, wow, the hand is really swelling up. That looks really painful. How interesting. Um, so they're wonderful experiences to have. I always think it's also a little bullshit, in the sense that we walk around. The ego is there for a reason. Um,
Hmm.
and as one of my favorite thinkers, Alan Watts, used to say, "There's no bigger ego trip than getting rid of your ego." Someone who
Hmm.
he frequented all those kind of blah blahs, as they were called back then, like talking groups, kind of basically what we're doing here, and
Hmm.
people trying to find their inner selves. And he said, like, people are so full of shit. Like, everyone trying to get rid of their ego while they're boasting to each other. Like, oh, I sat in Zazen for 7 hours yesterday and I got really sore legs. And the other guy would be like, yeah, well, I did it for like 19 hours. You should try that. People boasting about how long they can fast and
Hmm.
stuff. Just to, yeah, I'm really
Hmm.
working on my ego, man.
Well,
So,
I've done ayahuasca in Rotterdam. Well, I have done ayahuasca in the fucking Amazon. Come at me.
exactly,
Like,
exactly. Like, hippies and communists, and they also have their uh, well, their pyramids, their triangles of hierarchy and what's important. And we're always
hmm.
trying to find out who is doing better. And shame is
Yes.
to bring it
Yes.
is the tool. I think it's a I don't know if it's Western. I have no idea. I'm inclined to say that, but I don't have any way of testing it. But it definitely is the tool of our last few generations, if not longer than that. Some people try and, like, I don't know, do you know Robert Sapolsky? Talks a lot about stuff like that. Well, I mean, he's another one of those internet characters. And Jordan Peterson, of course, who you know, talks a lot about how these things are intrinsic. They're human, and
Hmm.
I,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that's true, but they sure are effective and very difficult to get rid of. It's very difficult,
Yes.
and it
Absolutely.
and it it affects our, yeah, our series. what I notice, for instance, is that the part of my upbringing in which my parents used shame to steer me in certain ways, um, even though I really, really, really hated that and tried to get rid of that and made sure to make and try and make sure to not put that on my daughter now that I'm a parent, it's practically impossible. Like it sneaks in there.
Mm-hmm.
It sneaks in there very, very often where I use shame to correct her in some way. And then afterwards, I think like, why? Why would I do that? Like I know the effect of that. Now I'm a grown up, and the only way I can correct
Mm-hmm.
myself is with shame, which is not effective. Well, I shouldn't do that
Mm-hmm.
with the microphone,
Yeah.
which is not effective. So why? It doesn't make any sense. It's a concept that perpetuates itself. I know the effects, I know the results, and yet why? Does that make
Well,
sense?
I think it might be a conflict between what society wants and what you want, because shame it's a tool. And I think you said it quite well. It's like a tool. It's like a tool that is used. I don't know if by society intentionally, but like to steer us in certain directions. And it's a tool and it's a signal. It's a
Mm,
signal that you've done something that you shouldn't have been doing. And it is, and you mentioned like that's the only way that you can get yourself to do certain things is
yeah.
through shaming yourself. So in a way,
Yeah.
it is very effective, and he does his job wonderfully. Does
No,
it
it
feel
doesn't.
good? No.
But it doesn't. I don't think it does. I think it's more in the way than that it's effective. I mean, that at least that's my honest experience of it. If I really engage with it, I think that more often, um, like with the what we started with the projects, I keep going back to that because it's the most recent thing that I'm aware of and working on myself. Which is, I mean, it's 2020. That's the phrase. I'm working on myself. That's the thing that I'm occupied with at the moment because the shame prevents me from just keep going, right? And that's, I mean, what else is there? Because the fantasy that something is going to turn out amazing is bullshit. The story
Mm-hmm.
that I'm telling myself, okay, also the fantasy that I'm telling myself that it'll probably crash and burn and fail and I'll never accomplish anything is also bullshit. The story
Um,
that I'm telling myself that I can think this process through to the point where I have an answer to work with is also bullshit. The only
mm-hmm.
thing that gets shit done is doing it. The only thing that's going to
Mm-hmm.
get my French paperwork done so that they don't shut off the water in 2 weeks is doing it. And if it means that no, and it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous that I can't get that done on days where I'm struggling, where I can look at it and I can try and translate 2 lines of it and then fill out one question, and then it feels like I have to go for a walk because
So,
it's so oppressive. It's but the
but
shame
the
is the
problem
thing
is
that
that is in
stops me from
French.
continuing. Ah, yeah, the fact that it's French. I mean, it doesn't help, but it's 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 really not the issue. That's a very nice excuse I can throw myself a bone with, but
Like for that for example, because I know how it works for me, but why? Like, what is preventing you from doing it? Like, what is the weight about it?
administration in particular. I mean, it's just I don't know. It's not terrifying or anything. It's just yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I would say, I mean, my first reaction is it's just so incredibly dull and, but to the point where it hurts almost, you know? I mean, you have days I know you because you've told me you have days where you just have the radio or a podcast on all day long, like just
Mm-hmm.
and I really, to drown out the whatever it is in your head that you don't want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that that comes out when I do paperwork the most. Like that
Mm-hmm.
all the see you can't do this, you know. Because it asks you questions. I mean, simple questions of like, what's the identity number of your water meter? So, okay, simple question, right?
Mm,
Simple question.
mm-hmm,
You just provide it. But the process that's involved is you are going outside, trying to find this fucking water meter, finding the water meter, finding out that there's three different water meters, which one is mine, trying to figure that out. Then it's which number is it? Like it's a whole process. And the whole time I'm doing that process, there's this voice of like, see, you fucking moron. You can't even exist in like you can't figure out which water meter. You have no idea. Oh, you have to
mm-hmm.
call someone to ask them a question. Like it's a hotbed of negativity.
And what
It,
I ask myself is, because I know them, there are people that would say, huh, I have no fucking idea which one of these three is my water meter. Let's just call the landlord and ask them. And
yeah,
that's the end. And they call the landlord and they ask them, or they would, for example, ask their neighbor, it's like, hey, this is all in French. Do you mind just helping me translate this? You know,
yeah.
Eh, how do these people do it? Like, did they? I'm quite curious to know.
What do you
Can we
mean?
just have as a guest, like someone that is fine, healthy, cheerful?
No, I don't think we should. I don't
No,
like
that's like,
I don't like people that are together and things are just. Also, they have nothing to say about it. They'll just be like, "Well, I mean, I just do it. I just kind of do it,
um, yes.
and then I've done it, and then I think about other things." They're like, "What do you mean?" And it just makes me feel like how that's so completely unattainable. Like I can entertain myself with the idea that at some point I've worked on myself enough, given myself enough tools, man, so that I can be reasonably functional on a month to month basis. But if I meet one of those people that have just, they grew up in a family where the people were constructive and they taught each other about healthy relationships and they don't have any of that sort of. I meet one of those people and I'm like, yeah, never mind, I'm fucked. This is done. It'll never happen because it's so natural. Like I have this one
Yeah,
friend,
it
like I
is.
know this guy, and it's painful to see him every time. Like he deals with being like an activist in the UK. He gets thrown into prison every so often. Like, and the way he talks about that, of like, well, actually, it's very formative, and you meet a lot of people, and just the kind of things that they do to do the things that fuck, never mind, man. Honestly, my point is clear. I'm belaboring it, and there's nothing more to add.
Yes, and shame,
And
and
shame, yeah. Now see, I saw myself talking nonsense, and I'm ashamed. The shame,
no,
definitely
and
recording in the morning is a lot more strong. I'm much more. I keep touching my hair as well. Like I can't. It's ridiculous.
because the yeah, I think in the
This,
morning, I mean, now we're neighboring 10, so it's slowly coming down, but we might be slightly less we might find ourselves less acceptable. It's like, have like puffy eyes,
I,
whatever, your hair all messy. It's like
yeah,
your
and
voice is kind of
not taking risks,
raspy,
not going into anything particularly interesting or funny. So
just asking me about my elaborate family history.
yes. Well, I wasn't. No,
We,
no, no, no. Hey, that's where you're wrong. I'm not asking about your family. I keep asking about you. You throw your family in the way. I'm not talking about me. No, here, let's talk about my family. How does shame relate to me? Well, it all started in the
when
1920s when
my
my
great,
grandmother
1920s, when my great
emigrated
grandmother
to. Yes, exactly.
to
Exactly.
Argentina. Like, you will
No,
be surprised how much you can derange a narrative if you have good stories.
I'm not surprised at all. That's exactly that's what stories are for, to
Hmm.
avoid
So yeah,
yourself.
I might have a tendency to do that. But actually, what I truly believe, now that you pointed out, is that in my mind I gave an answer.
Yes.
Like,
You,
obviously that relates to me because it ripples down, and the side effects. So for example, you at some point pointed out that I dodge direct questions.
you do very like expertly.
Um,
For sure.
so
You're like an Aikido master. It's like you redirect the energy. A
But
direct question comes at you like, so how does that make you feel? And you're just like, well, feelings are whoosh, poof, 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 poof. And then the question's on its back, like gasping for air. How did that happen?
interesting. In my mind, I'm truly am answering, but you're not the first one to point this out,
You are asking.
obviously.
Yeah.
So if you say, for example, oh, if I get too pushy, just tell me.
Mm.
And I would say, will I really be here if you would be being too pushy, or like, oh, don't you worry. Like that's for me is a direct answer, but it isn't.
Yeah.
It's like, but in my mind, it's like, oh, but isn't that obvious? But that requires the other person to do like even the smallest interpretation. And that created a bunch of issues. A
But
bunch of issues where I was absolutely sure I was very like crystal clear about things. Turns out I wasn't.
but it makes sense to me that if you grow up in a Cold War scenario, that you learn how to never, like you're a diplomat, you're a Swiss diplomat.
Yes.
Somebody asks you a direct question that you can take a stance on, and
Hmm.
you
That I
throw.
could take a stance
You
on,
could,
but
you
why
could.
would I?
No, why would you? You know exactly why you wouldn't, because that might escalate a situation. You don't want that. You want to stay neutral. There's money
Shit.
to be
I
made.
thought I was. There's very little money to be made. I'm gonna inherit from the both of them. So,
Oh yeah.
ouch. Maybe if there is
Why
something
did you
left.
say that? Why did you say
No,
that?
because you said, oh, there is money to be
Yeah,
had.
yeah,
Never mind. Like
exactly.
the only money that it comes from the. But I was not in for the money. I was in because I was like 7 and I couldn't really live anywhere else.
No, no,
No,
exactly.
that's
Yeah, no, you don't choose them. No, it's fine. It's fine to look forward
funny.
to your inheritance.
Fuck's sake.
You did. You told
No,
me you brought it up.
no, I'm
It's interesting that when I said there's money to be made, you're like, because that's, I mean, it's
because,
a very
but
crude way of thinking about it, but it's like you're appeasing both sides to
but that's
stay within
the
the family, to stay acceptable within the family.
oof. But that's probably because I had the conversation about inheritance with both of my parents
Sure.
yesterday
Yeah. Okay.
and Monday too. So it's like it just popped out because it's in both of their minds because they're
Mm.
getting both older.
Are your
So
the siblings that no longer talk to your father, are they written out of the will? Are they not getting an inheritance?
I can only say it's gonna be a shit show that I'm not looking forward to
Yo.
for all of the reasons. That means my dad is gonna
Yeah,
pass, which is not a good. I mean, I know it's gonna happen, but I also rather not start grieving now. So in my mind is alive and well
sure. But it's
forever.
gonna
But
be,
but it's gonna happen and it's gonna be a shit show, and that's just no way of preventing that.
yeah, it's tough. I just witnessed
So,
a division of not in my own family, but inheritance in a rich family is if there's not much to divide, it's fine. Yeah, yeah, you have €2, you have €2, we'll go our separate ways. But when it's a lot, when there's stuff to divide, it takes serious character to um, to not get greedy.
to
It's
not
tough.
get greedy.
It
Oof,
changes people.
yes.
It changes people.
and and what is interesting is, well, first of all, even if you don't consider yourself greedy, or if you know kind of convince yourself you're not greedy, at the first sign of someone else's greed, then you feel completely justified to go full in as well. It's like, oh, but they're greedy. I'm just protecting myself. It's like, oh, they started it. Like in an argument. When you escalate, it's like, oh, but you know,
Mm.
they, they started it. I just, with self-defense, basically.
Yeah, they get greedy, so I have to make sure that I get mine. I'm learning a lot
No,
here. I've learned a lot about you. I'm saying that because we're coming up on an hour and a half, and that's what we
yeah,
aimed for this episode to see. I don't feel that we've talked.
about
Uh,
shame much.
we did though. I think it came through. I didn't ask any of my questions. I don't think you did either. Why is that?
No.
Why can't we stick to this? What should be different? Should it be different? What do you think?
Honestly, we're just getting the feel of things. So we
Yeah.
both expected we would show up with the same mood we had yesterday evening. And of course, that didn't happen at
No,
all.
no, that absolutely. Also, I realized like there's so much. I mean, I don't. We're just sort of okay. I'm gonna start that sentence again. I just realized that there's a lot of things because we don't know each other that well. We don't know the background stories. There's only so much
Mm.
depth we can go into because there's no like I don't know how you think about certain things because I don't know who you are. So asking a question
Mm-hmm.
that's aiming at something uh, deeper. Jesus fucking
Mm-hmm.
Christ. Also, my work, like I work on the phone, like that's my job. My job is to use words. And but before my second cup of coffee, it's just not a thing. Let's do it like this. I say we end it here before anyone hurts
Yes.
themselves, and then we have a cup of coffee and then maybe a debrief. We talk about
Yeah.
this kind of thing, and then we see each other next week.
Yeah. And now you know way more about me. So does everyone else that bears through this. And I must say that
I thought
I
it was
feel it,
interesting. I thought
and
it
I
was
regret
interesting.
everything I've said.
That's good.
And
That's good. Then you end in shame. That at least
and I do
the
feel slightly
theme,
ashamed. Yes.
the
Mm-hmm.
theme, it's come together. Excellent.
Yes.
Now you have to
They've
figure out a
given
way of being.
very true and honest answers. Or have I?
Well, I mean, you're like I said, you're an Aikido master. That was very wonderful to watch. That was very wonderful to
Thank you.
watch. It's a good,
A master at work of
yeah,
diversion.
of not answering questions. Although, I mean, in a way, but who knows? Also, see you next
This is
time.
empty.
It's
Needs to be
coffee
filled.
time.
Do we?
Do we?